Yes, I mean, at the moment, we've got to be very cautious about what information is coming out of both Ukraine and Russia. Inevitably, always in these very early stages, you're going to get false reporting, some of which would be propaganda-based on both sides, in terms of obviously not wanting to show that they are losing or they're losing ground for any matter. But certainly we're hearing that it's a three-prong attack which is coming in from Crimea, Belarus and from Russia on the Ukraine. They are taking the Donbass area, and that is very much the intention, as Putin has said. He wants to demilitarize that, whatever that means. However, what we're going to see from the Ukraine is obviously a degree of resistance. We're seeing people mass evacuating from Kiev, and I think the concern is that the end game will be to take Kiev.
Air raid sirens have been heard in the capital, Kiev, and reports overnight of shelling. A really worrying time. Martial law has now been declared in the country. Just to give people at home a sense of what that means in terms of civilians and you know, the advice to stay at home. Is that a legal requirement now? Yes,
very much so. Having been in a number of countries myself which have had martial law imposed, it's very frightening for the general citizens, because they will be hearing the chaos outside, not only in terms of the indirect fires and possibly even gunfire, because we know that there's a lot of ballistic attacks which are going on right now, so there will be explosions going on across the country. But I think the fact that they realise that they cannot necessarily escape. The military has taken control of the streets, and there are very good benefits for this. Obviously, it's to reduce the chances of potential mass casualties, but at the same time, if you feel trapped in that sort of environment and that sort of situation, it's pretty hairy, to put it mildly.
Is the international community able to do anything at this stage? Because we are constantly told we're not putting boots on the ground, we're not going to start shooting the Russians. So unless we do that, is there anything realistically that we can do?
Yes, it's a really good question. At the moment, we do have troops actually in Ukraine at the moment. The question is, however, what are their rules of engagement? Are they to participate? Are they to collaborate with the Ukrainian forces? Because if they do, we already know from Putin's statements that if there's any retaliation by any other country, there will be serious consequences. And this was quite a chilling message that Putin sent out. We know that the government is meeting this morning for a COBRA meeting, an emergency COBRA meeting. What we're going to see potentially is a ramping up of these sanctions. How they're going to ramp them up and what difference that's going to make is very questionable, because when we consider that Russia has become quite insular and quite self-sustaining, they may not really worry that much.
In terms of our troops in Ukraine, then, what are they, I mean, likely sort of looking at helping with evacuation procedures, those sort of issues?
Well, may or may not be. You know, they've been down in an advisory role in many capacities, trying to provide training for local Ukrainian troops. 200,000 reservists within Ukraine, and that is Ukraine nationals, have been called up to respond to this situation. I think there's every good chance that other than perhaps special operations units, the others will want to take a somewhat passive stance, because, again, that could be seen as collaborating with Ukraine and, again, draw on those consequences. And I think that's something they're going to discuss at COBRA this morning.
And so, Will Geddes, is it really your view at this stage that diplomacy is dead? I mean, the UN Security Council had an emergency meeting overnight, you know, condemning everything that's happened, but we're seeing no face-to-face talks happening, quite rightly, I suppose, given what's happened. And yet, you know, the message is supposed to be that that diplomatic door is still open. We could still pull back. But, you know, it doesn't seem as though Putin will respond to that.
Yeah, that's a question which I think is very difficult to answer right now. I certainly wouldn't have the answer myself on that. I think certainly in terms of the world economies and in terms of the financial impositions that would be made through these sanctions, the potential is to push the Russian economy down to a sort of Iranian level. We know that the Moscow Stock Exchange has now been closed whilst these actions are taking place. So at the moment, it's whether that diplomacy will have any difference, but that will only come from how robust and what sort of defence and support we are going to be offering publicly to Ukraine to try and resist them.
What do you think the strategy is here, the Putin strategy? Is he looking for something short and sharp here or not?
No, I don't think so, Steve. I think, you know, I met with some very, very, very smart people the other day. We were discussing the situation, and they came from various different scopes within my world. The feeling is, Putin, this is just the start. I think one of the analogies which was used, which I thought kind of summed it up, was to say, if you imagine that the chair you're sitting on is Ukraine, what Putin is going to do is remove all the other furniture in the room while everyone's focus is there.